A fortune was won, tears were shed, and an entire family was ready to celebrate a life-changing victory. But just as the applause reached its peak, Liana, sitting quietly in her wheelchair, looked into the camera and delivered a single devastating line. "This money is not ours." The reason Steve Harvey instantly dropped his microphone and silenced the studio was the request Liana made next: to give the prize money to a stranger, a teacher fighting for his life in a hospital room in their hometown, someone whose name she barely knew. Liana's 2-year-old secret, the genesis of this unbelievable decision, was about to change everything. For a host like Steve Harvey, a man whose career was built on comedic timing and quick wit, this was a moment of profound silence. This was not a television show anymore. This was a moral choice, a pure act of human integrity played out under the harsh scrutiny of studio lights. This was the moment where the rules of the game were replaced by the unwritten laws of the heart. But to understand why this money was so easily given away, we must travel back 2 years and meet Liana and the rest of the Sterling family. They arrived in Atlanta from Elmsville, Texas, a small community where everyone knew the plight of the Sterlings. The family consisted of Liana, 19, who had been diagnosed with a rare aggressive spinal condition that required a specialized and heartbreakingly expensive experimental treatment. She was accompanied by her older sister, Kara, 30, who had deferred her dreams of college, working tirelessly as a barista, the sole breadwinner for the family's relentless medical bills. Supporting them were their loving aunt and uncle, Teresa and David, anchors of a family desperately trying to stay afloat in a sea of debt and despair. When Steve Harvey introduced Liana, he did so with the gentle kindness he reserved for children and those carrying visible burdens. He knelt down to her eye level, his famous smile softening into a look of genuine concern. "Liana, sweetheart, you're the youngest soul on this stage," Steve said, his voice quiet. "What did you sacrifice the most to get here today?" Liana's voice was soft but steady. "My future, Steve. My chance to go to Elmsville University with Kara. But it's okay. This is all for Kara's debt, and that's what matters." Kara immediately broke in, her eyes welling up. "That's not true, Steve. She deserves everything. We're here for her treatment, not my debt." Steve, sensing the deep, unspoken guilt between the sisters, intervened with his trademark humor. "Look at this family, arguing over who is more deserving. We're going to solve this, Liana. We'll win enough for your treatment and Kara's books. I promise you that." The game proceeded with an electric intensity that belied the family's quiet desperation. The Sterlings played with a synergy born of years of shared hardship. They fought tooth and nail through the first rounds. Kara's sharp, logical answers complemented Liana's surprisingly insightful guesses, often rooted in an understanding of human fragility far beyond her years. Liana, despite her physical constraints, was the emotional engine of the team. Her cheers loudest, her hope brightest. When the final question secured their path to the fast money round, the eruption of cheers from the Sterlings was not for points on a board. It was the sound of a small besieged army finally breaking through enemy lines. This was their shot at the $20,000, a sum that meant the difference between Liana's next treatment cycle and certain regression. Kara went first, securing a respectable 121 points. A wave of relief washed over the family. Now it was all up to Liana. She needed 79 points. Steve Harvey approached Liana's wheelchair at the podium, his face serious but encouraging. "Liana, 79 points. Just a handful of great answers, and this battle is won. Ready?" "Ready, Steve," Liana affirmed. The clock started. The studio held its breath. "Steve, name something you do to thank someone." Liana, "Send flowers." Steve, "Name a place you would never want an animal to escape from." Liana, "The zoo." Steve, "What is something that wipes away your tears?" Liana, a long pause. The clock ticked. Liana closed her eyes, and when she opened them, her gaze was fixed on a point far beyond the camera lens, perhaps 2 years into the past. "A stranger's generosity," the buzzer screamed. Time had run out. Steve's eyes widened, caught off guard by the profound, non-traditional answer. He knew immediately this was not a survey answer. This was a statement. "A stranger's generosity," Steve repeated, his voice thoughtful. "Let's see if our survey agreed with the wisdom of the world, Liana." Survey says, the board revealed the score for the unusual answer. 0 points. A collective sigh of disappointment swept the studio. The family's hopes momentarily crashed. That's okay, sweetheart, Steve said quickly, rushing past the moment. We still have 2 questions left. You ready to roll? Steve, name something that never runs out. Liana, love. Steve, name something you need in a fight. Liana, courage. The final scores were revealed. The points Liana needed were there. The goal was surpassed. The victory alarm blared, confetti shot into the air, and the Sterling family rushed Liana's wheelchair, their screams of joy piercing the sound system. They had done it. They had won $20,000. Steve Harvey, overwhelmed, shared a tight hug with Kara and David, then returned to Liana, who was sobbing with a pure, unadulterated relief. You won, Liana. You did it. The money is yours. You fought for your dream, and you won, Steve exclaimed, his voice full of pride. Liana looked up at him, her face soaked in tears and confetti. She shook her head, her expression resolute. Liana, whispering, yet the microphone caught every syllable. This money is not ours, Steve. The music, still playing, seemed to slow, then die completely. The studio went silent. Steve Harvey, still kneeling, froze. He looked at the rest of the family, still caught in their moment of celebration, completely unaware of Liana's whispered decision. Steve Harvey, his voice serious, authoritative. Hold on. Stop the music. Stop the cameras. Everything stops right now. The energy in the studio instantly shifted from celebratory chaos to a profound, unnerving silence. Steve slowly rose, dropping his microphone onto the podium. He took 2 steps back, addressing the entire production crew. The cameras, however, continued to roll, capturing the raw, unscripted moment. Steve returned to Liana. Steve Harvey. Liana, tell me what that means. Who gave you 2 more years of life? And why is this money not yours? Liana began to speak, and the audience, which had come for entertainment, was instantly transfixed, held captive by the sheer, devastating honesty of a 19-year-old girl. Liana, 2 years ago, the doctors gave me 6 months. My condition was progressing too fast. Kara had maxed out her credit, our savings were gone. We needed the experimental treatment, but it was too expensive. I was in my room at St. Jude's Children's Hospital when I overheard Kara crying in the hallway. She was talking about selling our apartment, about needing a miracle. Tears streamed down Kara's face. She finally understood Liana's choice. She hadn't known Liana heard her pain. Liana, the next week, the doctor walked in. Steve. He was smiling. He said an anonymous donor had paid for the entire first phase of the treatment. Every cent. The hospital wouldn't give the name. They just called it a stranger's generosity. That money gave me stability. It gave us hope. It gave us 2 more years to fight. Steve Harvey. And now you won this $20,000. Why do you feel it's not yours, Liana? Liana. 3 weeks ago, I saw an article in the Elmsville Journal. A high school history teacher, Mr. Adrian Cole, is fighting the exact same disease. He's 45. He has 3 young children. His family is organizing fundraisers for the same experimental treatment. They're short. They need exactly $21,500 for the first cycle. Liana looked directly at the camera, her tear-filled eyes unwavering. The universe gave us a second chance through a stranger. Tonight, the universe gave us $20,000. That money, Steve, is not for my stability. It's for Mr. Cole's survival. We have to be that stranger for someone else. We keep the hope. He gets the money. The audience rose spontaneously, their applause a slow, deliberate sound of reverence. They were clapping not for the win, but for the moral clarity of the choice. Steve Harvey walked to the side of the stage, his hands running over his bald head. He returned, holding a small tissue, which he used to wipe Liana's eyes. Steve Harvey, Liana Sterling, you came here to win money, but you just won something far more valuable. You won the respect of everyone who will ever hear this story. You fought for your life, and now you're fighting for a stranger's life. You showed us what courage truly looks like. Steve Harvey, turning to the production crew, his voice booming with authority. Producers, I want you to call the Adrian Cole Treatment Fund in Elmsville. I want this $20,000 prize wired to them immediately. I don't care what paperwork needs to be done. We are closing the circle of generosity right here, right now. The crowd's roar was deafening. The sight of the famously well-dressed host, tossing aside the rules of his multi-million-dollar empire for a selfless act, was intoxicating. Steve Harvey. But Liana mentioned they need $2,150. We just sent $20,000. That leaves $1,500 short. Steve reached into his own interior jacket pocket. He pulled out his wallet and carefully counted out $1,500 in crisp bills. Steve Harvey. This is not from the show, Liana. This is from me. I am closing that gap because I want Mr. Cole to know, tonight, that his fight is our fight. And I want him to know that the circle of generosity that saved Liana has now saved him. As Steve handed the cash to an emotional Kara, the producer rushed back onto the stage, handing Steve a phone. Producer? Steve, the Lighthouse Foundation, the anonymous donor from 2 years ago, they're on the line. They're watching the show, and they want to talk to Liana. The studio gasped audibly. The biggest secret of Liana's life, about to be revealed live on television. Steve handed the phone to a stunned Liana. Liana. Hello? Voice on the phone. Mr. Silas. Liana, this is Mr. Silas from the Lighthouse Foundation. We were the ones who paid for your treatment 2 years ago. Liana, sobbing. Mr. Silas, thank you. You saved my life. Mr. Silas. No, Liana. You saved ours. My daughter Anya passed away from the same condition. We started the foundation to keep her memory alive. But what you just did, giving away your prize to a stranger, that is the most profound act of human connection we've ever seen. Mr. Silas. Liana, we are not done. A young woman who chooses humanity over a check, who understands sacrifice, she deserves the world. The Lighthouse Foundation is going to pay for your college tuition, Liana. All 4 years, fully funded, plus all living expenses. Because the world needs your compassion, Liana, and you deserve to live your dream. Liana dropped the phone, covering her face, unable to speak, weeping tears of pure, unadulterated, glorious joy. Steve Harvey caught the phone, his face shining with emotion. Steve Harvey, did you hear that, everybody? The check for Mr. Cole is going out, and Liana Sterling is going to college. The cycle is complete. That is what happens when you follow your heart. The applause was overwhelming. The Sterling family, now standing together, realized their victory was far, far greater than the original cash prize. They hadn't won a game. They had won a moral triumph. The episode became one of the highest rated in the show's history. The Adrian Cole Treatment Fund not only met its goal but raised over $500,000 for others with the same rare condition, all thanks to Liana's decision. Mr. Cole received his full treatment and is now back in the classroom, teaching high school history. Liana Sterling is currently a student at the University of Texas, studying social work, committed to helping families facing the same desperate choices her family once faced. She keeps a framed photo on her desk, the moment Steve Harvey knelt beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder, an image of humanity at its very best. The picture is a constant reminder that sometimes the most valuable things we have are the things we choose to give away. And Steve Harvey? That day fundamentally changed his approach to television. The only thing he kept from that day was the memory of Liana's whispered words. This money is not ours. It became his mantra, a reminder that sometimes the greatest wins happen when you stop playing by the rules and start playing with your heart. Liana kept her promise to the universe. She became the stranger's generosity that saved a life. She proved that, even from a wheelchair, you can change the world. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story of humanity's greatest victory is never forgotten.